Club. Ian Macindoe, Ian Macindoe. How old am I? 53. Yeah, 53. And anything, other questions?
I'd heard of Ian, but we didn't really know each other. My first impression was I didn't really think too much of him. He was a bit bossy and he was a bit full of himself, I thought. But my friends convinced me to go out and date with him and said he was really nice and just went from there.
He's very funny. He always makes us laugh somehow. But you know, Dad's really considerate about everyone. And,
Ian talks fast, and we used to talk really fast, and often I'd zone out when he was talking, and we went to Byron Bay on a holiday. We were at this really nice restaurant one night, and I wasn't really listening because I was just enjoying the view, and then I sort of caught on that he was proposing to me, so I said, "Oh no, stop, you have to start again," because I wasn't listening. So he had to start the whole thing again, which the poor thing, he was so nervous. Chloe came along pretty quickly. So yeah, our married life pretty much started with babies. We were always pretty active. Ian was a very active father. He'd always be out playing basketball or running around, watch Dad work at the footy.
I've done most things. I've been to Olympics, I've done Olympic sports, and I was fit as an Australian baseball team and swim team at one stage, and basketball. I was involved in basketball first of all for the Saints and eventually for the Tigers. And I went from the Melbourne Tigers in the basketball to the Melbourne Tigers in the football. Yes, my nickname is Doobie. Some people only know me as Doobie. That you'll say, you know Ian Macindoe, and I say who?
Who is Doobie?
Yeah, Dubois. Doobs.
That's a very interesting question.
So Ian was head physio.
He's a husband and a father.
Obviously a special person in our football club.
Doobs was not only great at what he did, but he was also really good at just being a really good friend.
Really keen to always help people and get the best out of them.
An important professional colleague, mentor.
Just even here today, the boys love getting around Doobie as well and saying g'day.
He's been a huge part of the Richmond family.
He's a great person.
He's been a great friend to many people over a long period of time at this football club.
I think he's a big part of the fabric, and we talk about our jumper, and Doobs is a part of that. As much as he didn't pull it on or play for the Richmond Tigers, he's a massive part of the past and also where we are now in the future.
First of all, I was running on a beach in 2007, and being a most chauvinist speaker, I didn't like it when a woman sort of ran up. I knew something was wrong then when she kicked my butt.
Well, looking back, little things happened even before we realised Ian was unwell. He'd have really bad dreams and crying out in the night and a lot of movement in his sleep.
It bothered me more and more. By 2008, we'd done all these tests, MRIs, heart tests, vascular tests, blood tests, everything was normal.
Well, it took quite a while to be diagnosed because he knew that something was wrong, but he wasn't sure what it was. So he did a bit of Dr. Google and thought he had all these other different diseases. And he used to come home and complain about that his legs didn't move properly. And one day I saw him swimming and I said, "Yeah, your legs don't move when you swim."
And it was David Williams who said, I mean, you definitely have Parkinsonism when I first saw him, but I don't think it's Parkinson's disease. I think it's something else. I thought at the time, what a relief. How wrong could you be?
Well, I first met Ian about 7 years ago. Well liked by the people around him, very enthusiastic about his work, and I remember about his determination to understand all of his symptoms when he first came, and he'd been pretty right in terms of interpreting his symptoms, and he wondered whether or not they were a bit like Parkinson's, and I certainly agreed with him. Worrying for me, though, was that his symptoms at that stage had progressed a little faster than what I would expect for for a guy of his age with early Parkinson's disease, and he had some of those other additional symptoms that might make one think of multiple system atrophy. It's a worse diagnosis to make than Parkinson's disease. You don't want to just throw it out there flippantly that it might be the case. But from my experience with Parkinson's disease, it wasn't quite right, and that became more obvious as I saw Ian over a couple of times.
I remember when I first saw Dave Williams, he was asking completely different questions. And he said, have you ever got aggressive, or do your arms and legs ever move in bed when you sleep? I just hit my wife, or hit the wall. I said, what have you been watching me? Part of my white building case against me.
He sat us down and explained, or tried to explain, what MSA was, that it wasn't a very nice thing to have. And he did say, don't Google it because what's out there on the internet's not very nice. So that was, of course, the first thing we did when we got home, and it was quite confronting to see. We were in a bit of denial because we couldn't imagine that from where Ian was at that point in time, that where he would get to in supposedly a small amount or short amount of time. So yeah, it was sad, and it was hard to come to terms with, that it was such a brutal thing that he had for someone that was so fit and loved life, that he would get something like this.
Well, I used to be a Macindoe Physiotherapist for Richmond Football Club and Olympic Park Sportsmen. And then I found out I'm Ian Macindoe MSA sufferer.
Multiple system atrophy is a primary neurodegenerative condition, and it's associated with parts of the brain and the nervous system dying back. They're caused, or they're spread by a previously normal protein going rogue. Why the protein turns from a normal function to an abnormal function is not clear. MSA is unique. It often affects people earlier in life than, say, Parkinson's disease, and it's definitely more progressive than typical multiple sclerosis. So the symptoms and signs and problems accumulate at a faster rate than many other conditions that might affect people in their 40s or 50s.
So key symptoms that we see in multiple system atrophy are a lot of sympathetic nervous system involvement. So we start to see people having difficulties in maintaining blood pressure. So orthostatic hypotension, or dropping your blood pressure when you're going from sitting to standing, or even going from a cold space to a warm space, can be quite dramatic to the point where someone actually faints. We see people developing significant problems with bowel elimination, and constipation is a huge issue. And bladder elimination becomes a major issue as well, where people aren't able to effectively evacuate their bladders and often need to have a catheter popped in. Males often have difficulties with impotence, and that's often a very early symptom of MSA. Other signs and symptoms which are more global are progressive stiffness of all the muscles in the body, including the muscles that are responsible for swallow and speech. So as the illness progresses, communication and maintaining hydration and nutrition can become even more challenging as well.
For me, balance is most affected. Strength, anything Parkinson's suffers, along with blood pressure, thermoregulation, sweating, speech obviously gets affected, and people at my stage who got diagnosed that long is often driven medicine by this stage. 6 to 9 years is a common post-diagnosis, and it's like watching someone get old quickly before your eyes.
Multiple system atrophy was first described in the mid-1960s, and it's becoming increasingly understood and recognised by specialists in the field. There's no single test for it, and people who experience symptoms of MSA will have very similar symptoms to patients who have Parkinson's disease. For that reason, the diagnosis can be difficult.
I've had a few doctors actually say to me, what is MSA? Apparently about one GP will see one case in the career, and it's pretty rare.
We estimate that there's probably about 2,500 Australians live with MSA at any one time. Because of the difficulty in actually finding a diagnosis of the condition, it's sometimes a case where people never get diagnosed. We see a rate of diagnosis slowly increasing because we're getting better at investigating and certainly recognising some of these conditions.
Now, one of the unique things about the neurodegeneration in MSA is we've found virtually no evidence of a genetic link with MSA. There's really no true families that carry a genetic trait that predisposes many members of the family to it. But it's an area of research that's being looked very closely at. At the moment, we don't know what the principal cause is. We don't know what the principal cause of almost all neurodegenerative diseases are. Diagnosing someone with MSA is a difficult conversation to have. It's a conversation where, sure, it explains a whole lot of symptoms that the person has been experiencing prior to coming to the consultation. But the consultation ends with a discussion that we don't have a cure for this, that these problems are present, are likely to be present into the future, and are likely to get worse over a period of time, a time frame that is too short.
What's so good at day-to-day life? Yes, I'm very shy doing everything. And hopeless to do most things according to my wife. No, I've tried acupuncture and I've tried a few things, but acupuncture didn't do much for me. And I do my own version of hydro, which I don't get a hydro ball. I get with Paul in a normal pool. And I think Paul's swimming's come on. Is that right, Paul? My carer. Let's just say Paul's swimming skills led a bit to be desired in the first time. As I do the swimming once a week, I look to once a week with the personal trainer because, like a lot of people, I'm not good at doing exercise. By myself, I prefer an audience.
Yeah, so Ian's my only special population client. Most of the guys who do PT with are there to supplement their training. Ian needs to do some kind of resistance training to maintain rather than deteriorate with his condition. So yeah, I get him in an hour every week and we just go through some movements, just trying to get him working on some strength and some mobility exercises.
So I'm working with Ian to help him improve his physical function and to make his life easier to move around the house and get around places. I'm helping him trying to strengthen up specific areas relating to his core, his legs and his arms to try and make life a little bit easier for him with this condition.
Exercise is the key to a lot. I think if I'm going well, it's due to my previous fitness, and I started probably ahead of the game compared to other people. I'm always, I think, with the knowledge I have, fight against being too bent and shaking. And I remember once when I was still working, my arm stopped swinging automatically when I walked, so I just made a conscious effort to swing my arms when they stopped their reflex.
So what Ian has a little trouble with is he has more difficulty trying to access movement that he can think of. So when he tries to move the way he wants to, it doesn't come out the way he wants it to as smooth and coordinated movement. So he does present with some tremors and weaknesses that are related to the condition, and also because of the fact that it's so difficult to move some of the time. He'll get periods where he can't always find movement easily, other times it's just impossible. We really need to try and to find these windows of opportunity to try and really help him gain strengthening opportunities and find ways to maximize his quality of life physically.
With the program, what I did was I just thought basic movement patterns. So we're big, the way we train, and we're looking at movement. For example, a squat, a hip hinge, something like a deadlift. So I had movement patterns that we should be doing, and that's what we do with our classes. So with Ian, the differences, apart from the obvious differences, but it's having to firstly work on the movements he can and can't do, and then also the ones that Keegan says he has to do that he might not want to do. So things like, we don't tend to do a lot of rotational things, whereas for Ian it's very important he does some kind of rotational work. And then also minor things, such as he flexes his hands. He doesn't control that, that just happens. So we have to keep focused on things like opening up his hands. So there's things like that in a normal class we wouldn't even look at. And the other thing is fatigue. So he gets more of a mental exhaustion rather than a physical. So in a normal class where we're looking at guys where they're getting out of breath, and we might ask them a couple of questions to get their perceived rate of exertion or exhaustion. With Ian, he's going to normally tell you that he needs to have a rest. So it's very rare that he'll get out of breath first. It's more of a case of maybe his movement starts to deteriorate, which means that he's starting to get mentally fatigued, in which case he needs to recover and then have another go.
With multi-systems atrophy, it's a condition where the effects of it are not always apparent to people when you meet them eye to eye, and it might seem like they move a little bit slower, but a lot of the time that there are hidden sort of effects from the disease that do affect the person, such as their bladder and their bowels and their blood pressure regulation and all these things that happen internally. And a big part of it is also managing the level of fatigue associated with having to think, trying to access movement again. And all those things make it very difficult for us to fully appreciate the extent of their disease. And I guess as health professionals, it's our duty to try and help people determine what areas that they can improve on, and also work out ways where we can try and help them improve their level of function for a longer period of time, even though it's a condition that is gradually making things worse. So I think that's an important consideration, is when we talk to people about this condition, that we understand it is going to happen for a very, very long time, and we don't have a cure for the disease. But I think we can do a lot in terms of supporting them, not just physically and from a health perspective, but also giving them all the emotional support and social support that we all need as human beings.
Obviously he finds it a challenge to speak, and it can be quite a challenge to understand what he's saying. But it's that realisation that he's still sharp as a tack, and mentally he's working fine. He naturally isn't. He doesn't feel sorry for himself. It makes you appreciate what you have got, those basic things that we take for granted. I suppose something else is interesting. We just started rowing as well, so I found out that he's able to row, and he quite likes to row. So last week we did a 3-minute max row, and he seems to have carried that with him all week. And he came in this morning and said, right, I'm going to beat my distance last week. So we did 440 metres last week, and then he just smashed it. He said he wanted to do 500, he did 560 metres this week, I think. So little things like that where you realise, or maybe take for granted, but realise that those are things he's going to focus on. Those are things he wants to be better than he was last week, which is massive. And I suppose it's that realisation that those, what we might class as small things, is pretty huge for him. And to spend an hour with us wanting to accomplish something we might find quite small, but for him it's a massive achievement. So it's a massive learning experience for me.
So I think Ian's a fantastic guy who's taken MSA in his stride, in that he's really tried to forge ahead and live a life as full as he can. So I think he's done a really good job in trying to find help as much as possible, but try and also maintain independence. So I've seen him a few times where we try and help him get up and off the bed, and he's really quite keen on doing lots of things for himself, engaging in a home exercise program, and obviously coming in here where he can receive help from a personal trainer to help motivate him and take him to the next level. So I think he's just a fantastic guy, and he's truly an inspiration for both myself and my patients as well.
Time now to hear an emotional story about a man, Ian Macindoe, who is an enormous part of the Richmond Football Club, a part of its family, and he's had a very hard time of late.
It's almost that his body's shutting down and not letting him do the things that he has always wanted to and loved doing.
It's called MSA. It's very rare. There's only 2,000 people in Australia that have it, but it looks like Parkinson's when it's uncontrolled. So Parkinson's disease is the most common movement disorder that people see.
It's hard to see. It's someone you care about, and to see how tough it's been for him. And obviously he's a very proud person, and to have a debilitating illness like that is always going to be hard.
My friend Chris Bradshaw, who's a doctor at Geelong, used to be the club doctor here, and he always wanted to get me down here. I think I've attended possibly 300 games.
It can be really tough being in rehab at times, so he was always really good to be around. He was good fun, and always went above and beyond in terms of the rehab process and looking for ways to get me back on the track.
I've always been a big believer that good people breeds a good culture, and I think he's certainly one of those guys that's sort of helped create the culture that we have now.
The club's been very supportive, and from day one they always said, well, how can we help you?
We also had our dinner the other night
that we raised, I think it was about $50,000. So
it was great for him just to see so many people there. I think it's the most people we've ever had upstairs.
He's got the donation from the club. He's also become a life member, which is a huge one for us. And yeah, we're just going to give him a heads up and a helping hand wherever we can.
As I say, it's football clubs are great places, how they look after their own and all that. But yeah, they've been fantastic for me and my family.
he's outstanding. Like he was, as Jacky said, he became rapidly known as a very good shoulder physiotherapist and worked with swimming and baseball, and had a very intelligent and very organised approach to shoulder rehab, which is really cool.
No, I really did look up to him then. He was a quality practitioner. I was really very keen to maintain Ian's involvement in the clinic, as long as he felt he could, and he's still very much part of our family. And
so I suppose apart from being Ian's sister, I'm also the lawyer in the family, and in some ways that's helped through this process. Fortunately, we haven't had to draw on it much, but one thing Ian was really realistic about when he first got his diagnosis, he got some advice about there will be a day in the future, and you don't quite know when that will be, where you need to make sure that you have your affairs in order and you have the necessary powers of attorney for your wife and anybody else that you need to set up, so that you don't lose the capacity to make those decisions and have those requirements in place, and so that you can always be at peace that if ever you suddenly have a dramatic progression in your illness or something unpredicted, everything's in order and you have peace of mind. So we got together and made all of those arrangements with Jacky a number of years ago now, and I'm glad we did it all then, because at that time Ian was barely showing the symptoms of his illness, and it was an easy conversation to have and plan and organise, and we don't feel like we're needing to do those things urgently now. I think hopefully Jacky feels comfortable, and Ian, most importantly, feels comfortable that he doesn't need to worry about those things. But I think the second time that the legal side of it became relevant was a pretty frustrating experience that people with rare illnesses must confront often, unfortunately. But Ian, there came a time where Ian really couldn't work anymore. His physical, the impacts physically on him of his disease were making it very difficult for him to work as a physiotherapist anymore. Balance in particular made things difficult, and Ian needed to claim his income protection insurance, which fortunately he had, but it was rejected. His claim was rejected, and it became very apparent that the reason his claim was rejected was because multiple systems atrophy was not an illness that was well known. It wasn't an illness, therefore, that was specified on the usual insurance policies under the category of illness that would qualify to claim on your income protection insurance. So other illnesses such as Parkinson's disease, MS, MND and other neurological diseases were all on that list, but there was no MSA. And as a result, the insurers said, well, it's not there, so no cover. Understandably, that was not something that we could just leave and accept, and Ian enlisted my help on that, and one of my fantastic work colleagues, a retired partner and still consultant to the firm, Pat McCabe, came to the rescue. Patrick got involved and had a look at this and took it on, and we assisted in writing some correspondence back responding to this denial of cover. And it became apparent that the insurance company's doctors weren't familiar with this illness and had done Dr. Google and formed the view that the reason for this illness was self-imposed, usually as a result of drug abuse. And that was a very, very devastating and difficult response for Ian to receive.
Multiple system atrophy isn't a famous disease. It doesn't attract much recognition from the lay community, from insurers, from community or governmental resources.
At the moment, they're not recognised within health. They don't have a clinical code within our acute healthcare system, which they really should do, because they're very complex conditions, and potentially they're conditions that actually take up a lot of healthcare resources unless they're managed particularly well.
But Patrick, not to be deterred, had some conversations with Ian's neurologist, Professor Williams, who was understandably very upset about this ill-informed opinion, medical opinion, and we pulled together more responses, and happily they ended up accepting cover. But you do wonder what it must be like for people that don't have access to help, as Ian did through me and for me in turn through Patrick, to battle and take on some of these decisions where somebody might have had to take that to court and not been able to afford to do so. But I think it just reveals again the particular challenges for people suffering from illnesses which aren't well known and are rare.
I guess we're maintaining sort of our efforts to promote and raise awareness about these conditions. We're maintaining our efforts to fundraise for these conditions so we can support initiatives that both increase awareness and increase the clinical care that people actually get. Every year we're dedicated to actually developing healthcare professional and carer events dedicated towards people impacted by these diseases. So in a small way, we're working very, very hard unfortunately within our capacity. I mean, Parkinson's Victoria as an organisation has only got 9 employees, and we cover the whole state. So in a small way, we're doing our best to try and promote and raise profile of these conditions, and certainly collaborations with larger entities such as the Florey and the Alfred Hospital are really helping us to do that.
There's no doubt that there's a lot of research in the area of neurodegeneration, and to a large extent the progress made in Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease will be relevant for considering disease-modifying therapy in MSA. And so they're good focuses and frequent focuses of research teams around the world, and we should hope that that sort of research progresses over time, and we hope that progression leads to strategies for modifying the condition.
I think all I'd really say in summary is I think Ian Macindoe will create a legacy and has set an example for so many people to follow. I think what he's doing to teach not only the profession but many around him about this disease and how one can continue to forge on and take each step as it comes is an example and contribution that many people will benefit from, and as do we, just as family members. You know, love his anecdotes. Don't know how many more historical stories Jacky can put up with, but we'll keep going with it as long as he wants to tell them.
I've got 2 beautiful girls, Chloe and Sophie, and I've got a very hard-working, supportive wife. And my whole family, it does impact on them, MSA. I always thought I was going to be an older, sort of live to grumpy old age and be an active father. But instead I can't be trusted very much and can't do very much. So I'm really at the beck and call of the family a lot more than I thought I would be.
Our relationship has moved slightly, which is again hard for him to ask me to help do up his shoelaces or help him in the shower or whatever. Well, because the girls were so young when Ian was diagnosed, it was a few years the girls caught on that Dad couldn't run anymore, couldn't take them on runs, and there was one afternoon when Ian took the girls for a bike ride and he rode the bike into a cyclone fence and fell off. So the girls came home and said, "Oh, Dad fell off his bike." When it became quite obvious before Ian started walking with the walker, the frame, he was stumbling and falling a little bit, and so we thought before he started to have to use the aids that we'd have to explain. We explained to the girls and we told them only part of it. We were honest, but we didn't go into too much detail of what the disease was and how it would progress so quickly.
I remember when I first told the girls that I had a problem, and I used it on fortunate terms. I have a problem with the nervous system, and I remember Chloe saying, "Oh, that's all right, Dad. I get nervous too sometimes."
I guess when we were younger, it was really fine because we didn't really take much notice of it because we were kids. It's not that we don't care that he has MSA, but we don't think of Dad, he has MSA. We think of him as our dad. He hasn't changed. He still is funny self. He's the self. He's the same dad. He's just.
I guess you could say that he hasn't changed on the inside, but on the outside, he has.
It's your family that see your worst. And everyone else, they don't get a real idea of how bad you can be. But I have a supportive family.
I think family's a remarkable thing, and it's going through experiences like this that remind you of how important family is. And we're blessed, I think, thanks to the older generation with being brought up with family values, and all of our family, my own sons were mentored and brought up and loved family holidays with their cousins, and that continues now. Most of the nephews and nieces are all in their 20s, and it's just fantastic to see everybody contributing in different ways. I know Jacky appreciates it enormously, and Chloe and Sophie love their cousins and love their aunts and uncles, and Ian loves family too, probably the most of everybody.
The hardest thing for E is because he can't participate fully, but for us it's important to have him still involved in as much as we can. It was hard to feel like that we needed help, to accept help, but it sort of came to a point that we had to have someone in to help us, and so I could continue to do bits more with the girls, sporting runs and that type of thing. So, and now Ian can't be left on his own, so we have to have someone come in, and because at a point I felt like I was being pulled in a million directions. So now that we know that Ian's safe, and we can sort of plan a bit more, which is good.
Because I feel like Mum has all this pressure to look after us two, but also Dad and her sister. So I feel really bad for Mum because she has to look after everyone. But I think that in the end she, I wouldn't say enjoys it, but like, it's good because, yeah, we're all family.
Yeah, I don't know how she does it though.
Yeah, she's superwoman. Well, obviously we've had to make some new improvements to our house and things, and we had to get some new devices, like his walker, which he uses, and the wheelchair, and this new voice thing that makes him louder, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, like
it's fun to play with.
Like this isn't supposed to sound bad or anything, but even though it's like a bad thing, it's like a disease, but it also kind of has its advantages, if you know what I mean. Because like, you know, all bad things has a good advantage. Like what was I going to say before? Like one advantage would be like, so we would have like, sorry, there would be like handicap lines and things where we'd get to go in.
Ian is remarkable. I mean, mentally he's one of the strongest people I know, and he's one of the most determined people I know. And I always knew he would, from the moment we had this terrible diagnosis, I knew he would not give up, and I knew he would fight every step of the way to do as much as he could to live life as fully as he could, and still does. He's an incredibly giving person, he's an incredibly intelligent person, and he hasn't stopped using all of those qualities and skills. He still wants to mentor people where he can, he still wants to contribute and advise wherever he can, and he's just an amazing guy, and none of that's changed. Mentally, none of it's changed.
Well, he is a very lovable, hilarious and interesting person. Yeah, he's really cool. Well, I'm not saying he's a cool dad, I'm not saying that, but he's really not, he's really, yeah.
It's just good to have there.
he's truly remarkable person. He's so loving and kind and funny, and he's just taken this in his stride, and it's really sad for him, and even though we don't make it sad, but it's really sad, and he's just fantastic, and I love him dearly, and he loves the family, loves the girls, loves his own family, and yeah, he's lovely. He's a great guy, and we're very lucky to have him.
I adore my brother. I love his family, and we're lucky we're from an incredibly supportive family and broader family, and this reminds you of what life is and what happens in life, and I wish that Ian wasn't battling what he's battling, and there are times when you feel really emotional about it, but in so many respects that feels just completely self-indulgent, and the much better way to react to this and make the most of what is a really sad situation is to embrace Ian's determination and attitude and be right there with him. And
every night my mum taught me this song, so whenever you see the first star at night, you go, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, I wish I will, I wish that I might, grant the wish I wish tonight, and then you make a wish. And every night, whenever I do it, if I see a star, I say I wish for Dad to be cured, because that's my number one wish.
It'd be nice in my lifetime that there'd be some real breakthroughs in even treatment, or be fantastic to have a cure, because I know there's a lot of work with happening with multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's, so it'd be great in the next 10 years that there could be a real breakthrough to help sufferers with these awful diseases, and to make it easier for them, prolong their lives, and make it easier for the families that are going through it with them. So we can, fingers crossed, that the research is getting done, and that hopefully that something positive will come out of it, and help other people that are going to be diagnosed in the next day or year or whatever, that something can be done to stop it, slow it down even.
Yeah, I'd like to increase the awareness of atypical Parkinson's problems like MSA. I often think of MSA as being the ultimate torture, that every day you wake up you've lost some capacity. There's something you used to be able to do which you no longer can do. Keep smiling. I don't know. That's all, I think.